you call it love. The aching, the anxiety, the butterflies followed by silence, the obsession with being enough for someone who never really sees you. But what if it isn't love? What if what you're calling love is just emotional survival? What if the person you can't stop thinking about isn't a soulmate, but a symptom, not of romance, but of unresolved pain? Carl Jung would tell you to pause and look inward, because love, real love, is mutual, grounding, expansive. Survival, on the other hand, is reactive, frantic, consuming, and the line between the two isn't always clear. At first glance, it feels like love. You're drawn in, you think about them constantly, you feel a sense of urgency, a deep need to matter to them. Their attention feels like oxygen, their absence feels like suffocation. You overanalyze every message. You wait by your phone like your life depends on it. You interpret their inconsistency as mystery, their distance as depth, their neglect as a test you're supposed to pass. But love doesn't do that to you. Love doesn't feel like gasping for air. Love doesn't feel like anxiety with a heartbeat. Carl Jung taught that what feels urgent is often unconscious, that we are pulled toward people and situations not by accident, but by the hidden architecture of our psyche, what he called the shadow. The shadow is made up of the parts of ourselves we don't want to see, don't want to admit, or were forced to hide as children. And often, what we call love is just our shadow trying to resolve itself. You think it's love because you feel it so deeply, but intensity is not the same as intimacy, chaos is not the same as chemistry, and longing is not the same as connection, that ache you feel when they're distant. It's not proof of love, it's a sign of emotional deprivation, not from them, but from long before them. Because here's the hard truth Jung would want you to see. We don't just fall in love with people, we fall into patterns, into wounds, into reenactments of our earliest emotional experiences. Think back, not just to your last relationship, but to the ones before that. The ones that left you confused. The ones where you gave everything and got little in return. The ones where your love felt like labor, where you tried to fix them, heal them, save them. Where you were addicted to their potential but starving for their presence. Do you see the pattern? Jung called this the complex, a cluster of unconscious beliefs, emotions, and memories that get triggered in specific situations. You don't choose your complex, but it shapes your choices. It whispers to you through emotion. And unless you become conscious of it, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Many of us have a love complex, but it's not really about love, it's about survival. As children, we're wired to need love like we need food and water. But not all of us received it in a consistent or safe way. Some of us had to earn affection, others had to perform. Some had to disappear, to be small and pleasing to avoid punishment. Some were ignored unless they were achieving. Some were only noticed when they were in pain. So we learned that love was not a given, it was a transaction. We internalized that love means proving yourself. That closeness means anxiety, that to be lovable, you have to sacrifice. And then we grew up, carrying those beliefs into adulthood, mistaking survival strategies for romance. When you chase someone who is emotionally unavailable, you're not chasing love. You're reenacting your emotional blueprint. When you try to fix someone who is emotionally wounded, you're not being noble. You're trying to earn love the way you always have, by being useful. When you feel more alive in chaos than in calm, it's because your nervous system was wired to see inconsistency as normal. Jung believed that relationships reveal the unconscious, that the people we're magnetized to reflect something hidden within ourselves. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So what if the people who hurt you aren't your soulmates but your mirrors? What if you're not in love, you're in a loop of emotional survival, a loop of chasing unavailable people so you don't have to face your own feelings of unworthiness, a loop of giving more than you receive so you can feel needed, a loop of longing so intense it convinces you that what you feel must be love, because what else could hurt this much? But here's the twist. Love is not supposed to hurt like this. Not the kind of love Jung called mature love. Mature love is not born from fear. It's not rooted in insecurity. It doesn't require you to shrink, to chase, to beg. Mature love begins with individuation, with the process of becoming whole within yourself. Only then can you meet another as an equal, not as someone trying to be completed. Jung's concept of individuation is the process of integrating the shadow, of becoming conscious of the unconscious, of no longer letting your past dictate your present. When you begin to individuate, you stop asking, well, how do I make them love me? And start asking, why do I need their love to feel whole? Because until you confront that question, you will keep calling it love when it's actually fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being invisible, fear of feeling the emptiness that's been there since childhood. So you fill the silence with longing, you call the chaos passion, you chase the high of validation, but that isn't love, that's survival. You don't want a partner, you want a parent. Someone to finally give you what you never received, unconditional love. But no partner can do that for you. That work is yours. You think you're looking for someone, but you're actually looking for a feeling, and that feeling is not love. It's safety. Real love doesn't come from abandoning yourself for another. It comes from returning to yourself again and again. Especially when the urge to chase, to fix, to perform is strongest. Love that costs you your peace isn't love. It's survival mode dressed as romance. Ask yourself, do I feel safe in this relationship? Or do I feel anxious, unsettled, unsure? Do I feel seen and accepted? Or do I feel like I'm constantly auditioning? Do I feel like I can rest? Or like I'm always one wrong move away from being left? If you answered the latter, you're not in love. You're in a nervous system response. And the person you're with is not your partner. They're your trigger. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Jung believed that we are all driven by the unconscious, but healing happens when we bring it into the light, when we stop projecting our needs onto others, when we stop outsourcing our worth, when we stop expecting love to heal wounds it didn't create. The first step? Sit with yourself. Feel the ache, let the longing surface. Not to dwell in it, but to understand it. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Often the answer isn't being without them, it's being with yourself. It's facing the silence they leave behind. It's realizing that the relationship was a distraction from your own pain. But in that pain is your power, because the wound is where the work begins. Jung wrote, your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. So look inside. Look at why you equate chaos with love. Look at why stability feels boring. Look at why you ignore red flags and call it hope. Look at why you stay in places that make you shrink. Look at why your heart races not when someone loves you, but when they might leave. That is not love. That is a survival pattern your nervous system calls familiar. But familiar is not the same as safe. Familiar is not the same as love. And love, real love, doesn't require you to earn your place. It doesn't make you feel small. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't weaponize your vulnerability. Love is presence. Love is reciprocity. Love is peace. And when you begin to feel that within yourself, you stop confusing emotional labor with connection. You stop calling red flags just their trauma. You stop trying to rescue people in hopes that they'll love you back. You stop being a savior, and you start being sovereign. The truth is, many of us were not taught what healthy love feels like. We were taught how to survive emotionally, how to be needed, how to avoid abandonment, how to be pleasing, performative, and perfect. So when someone actually loves us, it doesn't feel like love. It feels suspicious. We say they're too nice, not exciting, lacking chemistry. But what we're really saying is they don't match my trauma template. And until you update that template, love will always feel like survival. The moment you realize this is the moment you begin to wake up. You start to see your patterns, not as proof that you're broken, but as messages, as mirrors, as invitations to heal. Because you're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the pattern, to the emotional roller coaster that mimics what love used to feel like. Jung would say, this is the beginning of consciousness, not in the abstract spiritual sense, but in the real, gritty, psychological sense, the kind of consciousness that hurts before it heals, the kind that drags your illusions into the light and dares you to see what you've been avoiding all along. Because love, when confused with survival, doesn't liberate you, it binds you. It binds you to the past, to your unmet needs, to the version of yourself that still believes love must be earned, chased, or proven. But when you begin to see the pattern, not just feel it, you're becoming aware. And awareness is the first step to freedom. Freedom from the cycle. Freedom from the chasing. Freedom from calling your trauma chemistry. Freedom from the belief that love must hurt. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you're unconscious, you think it's fate that you're always attracted to the person who's distant. Fate that you always feel too much in relationships. Fate that people always leave. But the moment you become conscious, you realize it was never fate. It was repetition. It was wiring. It was survival instinct disguised as romantic longing. Psychologist John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, would explain that our adult relationships are shaped by our earliest bonds, especially with primary caregivers. If you experienced inconsistent care, where love came and went without warning, you're more likely to develop anxious attachment. And with that comes the compulsion to overfunction in relationships. You learn to monitor other people's moods instead of your own. You learn to anticipate rejection before it happens. And when someone pulls away, you panic, not just emotionally, but physiologically. This is where Bessel van der Kolk's work in The Body Keeps the Score becomes relevant. He explains that emotional pain is not just psychological, it's physical. The brain regions that process emotional rejection are the same as those that process physical pain. That's why heartbreak feels like your chest is caving in. That's why your stomach clenches when they don't text back. That's why your nervous system goes into high alert when someone becomes distant. You're not overreacting. You're reliving. And this is the trap. Your body is trying to protect you, but your mind calls it love. You call it butterflies. You call it passion. You call it just knowing. But those sensations are often your trauma trying to resolve itself. When you grow up believing love must be earned, the absence of anxiety feels like boredom. Stability feels foreign. Calm feels suspicious. So you end up chasing intensity thinking it's love. But intensity is often just unprocessed fear. Freud called it repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to repeat old traumas in the hope of mastering them. Jung built upon this, suggesting that we are not just trying to repeat experiences, but to integrate them, to become whole, to stop outsourcing our identity to the people we want to save us. So when you finally become conscious of these cycles, something inside you shifts. You begin making different choices. You start saying no to people who drain you, not because you're angry, but because you're aware. You stop romanticizing pain. You stop calling inconsistency a test of your devotion. You begin to honor your nervous system, not override it for the sake of being chosen. And more importantly, you begin to recognize that your love is sacred and it should never have to beg. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. It's not about closing your heart. It's about cleaning the lens through which you love. Because when the lens is covered in old fear, abandonment and shame, you don't see the person in front of you. You see a mirror. You see your parent who left, the partner who betrayed, the friend who turned away. And you react not to them, but to the reflection. But once the lens clears, once the unconscious becomes conscious, you start seeing clearly. You start choosing people who meet you where you are, not where your wounds live. You start building relationships based on truth, not trauma, on presence, not projection, on peace, not pain. And this is where Jung's idea of individuation becomes not just relevant, but essential. Individuation is the process of becoming a whole person, not a perfect one, not a constantly happy one, but a real one, a person who can hold both light and shadow, a person who no longer splits themselves into lovable and unlovable parts just to earn someone else's affection. The deepest love you will ever experience is not with another, it's with the version of yourself you no longer abandon. That version of you, the one that doesn't contort, perform, or self-destruct for approval, is the foundation of all other love. So no, it's not love, not yet. It's survival, it's longing. It's your body remembering what it's like to be afraid of being left. But it doesn't have to stay that way, because you are allowed to outgrow the patterns that once protected you. You are allowed to stop calling heartbreak a soulmate. You are allowed to stop chasing people who confuse attention with affection. You are allowed to start claiming your worth, not with arrogance, but with calm clarity. Because when you stop trying to survive love, you finally start to live it. And that, Jung would say, is when the real journey begins. Not toward another person, but toward yourself. You begin unlearning the belief that love is sacrifice. You begin replacing adrenaline with safety. You begin recognizing the subtle signs of real connection, the text that comes without asking, the emotional check-ins, the steady presence of someone who sees you as you are and still chooses to stay. You stop confusing pursuit with passion. You stop seeing calm as dull. You stop running after people who give you just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to feel secure. This is not detachment. This is discernment. You're not becoming colder, you're becoming clearer. You begin building what Dr. Gabor Mate calls emotional literacy, the ability to identify what you're truly feeling, what you're truly needing, and to express it without fear. You stop outsourcing your emotional regulation to others. You stop making someone else responsible for soothing your inner child. And the most beautiful shift happens. You stop looking to be chosen and you start choosing yourself. Not as a consolation prize, not as a fallback plan, but as the main love story. Because that's where healing lives. Not in finding someone who erases the pain, but in becoming someone who can sit with it, honor it, and not let it run the show. You start holding space for your younger self, not shaming them, not fixing them, but saying, I see why you thought love was something you had to earn. I see why you chased people who couldn't love you. But we're not doing that anymore. We're safe now. We choose differently now. And that moment, when you finally start choosing differently, is where everything changes. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are not too much. You were surviving. You were wired to protect yourself. You were doing what you were taught, But now you are learning something new, and in that learning there is liberation. In that awareness there is a quiet power, a deep remembering of who you are beneath the fear. So no, it wasn't love.
Not yet.
It was survival.
But now it can be something more, not performative, not panicked, not exhausting.
But real, steady, kind, present, and maybe, for the first time in your life, safe.
Because love isn't supposed to feel like a test. You're always failing.
It's supposed to feel like a homecoming
And now you're on your way home.
to you.